It can be pretty confusing out there, can't it? I mean, it's hard enough just struggling to the stores trying to find a particular item. But then you're faced with the choice of which of the several alternatives is the most appropriate to buy. Not only that, but the whole process seems to become more complicated every day. And we start to wonder, who designs all these things in the first place? How do they know what they're doing? And if they do, how is it they don't make it obvious? Better turn this blooming thing off. That's what this series is all about. In the next 7 programmes, we'll be looking not just at the range of items we're faced with in the stores, those items that we use and are abused by every day, but also at the factors that affect their very existence, from their design to their manufacture, from their use to their ultimate effect on our environment. We'll be looking at items from plastic cutlery to expensive cars, from the choice we make in our clothing to the decisions we make when designing the rooms we live in. And from these and other examples, we're going to see that what sense can we make of it all, of understanding design. That way we'll all benefit. So these programmes will not only be a defence against bad design, but also a guide to the appreciation of good design. In this first programme, we're going to deal with some fundamentals. We're going to establish the factors that influence the design of almost any item, a kind of checklist for designers or would-be designers, or for all of us as users of design. And where else to start but at the beginning, with the word design. And not surprisingly, there are many definitions of design. They all differ a little, but they all have one thing in common. Design is concerned with planning a solution to some need or problem, be it an item of clothing, an artifact, or a whole system. And design decisions should be made that will result in appropriate solutions. Cost, materials, function, use, repair, maintenance, etc., all appropriately considered. In other words, good design produces appropriate solutions. And this gives a key word for this programme and for the whole series: appropriate. Now, some of you may wonder whether appropriate design has anything to do with the way we seem to hear the word design used lately, with phrases like designer jeans. It's a good question, because we seem to find the word design used a lot. In advertising, for example, it's become a trendy word in itself. But did this year's colours have to be called designer colours? That's ridiculous when you think about it, because good design shouldn't be a passing trend. However, in some ways, design is relatively new. That sounds a bit confusing, so let me explain. And the best way to demonstrate how design can be considered a recent phenomenon is to look at an example. Something that's been around for some time. The car. The car is well finished with a smooth aerodynamic form which we are willing to expose to some of the worst conditions imaginable. But cars weren't always like this. The design of the motor car was never really revolutionary, it was generally evolutionary. The early horseless carriages were very similar to the horse-drawn ones. They went at about the same speed and were made from the same materials. The large wheels offered some momentum, but generally they were there to give the smoothest ride, bearing in mind the conditions of the early roads with potholes and large cracks. The bigger wheels rode right over the cracks and through the mud. So the body of the vehicle was high off the ground, hence the footrest. While early cars were made from canvas, wood struts and the like, other models began to use sheet steel, bent into fairly simple shapes. And as the engines became better and better, and cars could go faster, a windshield was needed to protect the driver. The roads were slowly improved, and solid rubber tyres gave way to pneumatic tyres on smaller wheels, and this made it possible to design car bodies that were lower to the ground. The footrest became a kind of running board. Over the next few years, cars became more reliable, and mass production technology brought the car within the financial grasp of more and more people. Compound metal forming techniques produce smoother forms, like these, originally called turtle tops in the trade. The cap for the radiator water didn't need to be as accessible, the starting handle became unnecessary, and the running board all but disappeared. In the rich, opulent days of America in the 1950s, fashion gave us cars with fanciful fins and twin headlights. And this turbine car made in the 60s never caught on. But energy costs and concern for the environment have changed our thinking considerably. Today's modern cars take advantage of substantial advances in engine reliability and efficiency, of compound metal forming and curved glass, of smooth roads and a range of metal finishes and paints. Curved metal panels are stiffer than flat ones, so we can use lighter gauge metal and thus save weight. And the smoother shapes are more aerodynamic. They slip through the air more easily, and such cars tend to give a quieter ride for passengers and are generally easier to clean. And now, plastics will offer an even wider range of new possibilities. The history of the car is a good example of evolutionary design. The fact is, what was appropriate remained, what wasn't faded away. Appropriate changes for appropriate reasons, but also a lot of mistakes along the way. For instance, the Ford Edsel was thought by its manufacturers to be the combination of all the leading features desired by the North American public. But they were very wrong. That mistake cost the Ford Motor Company a lot of money, but they recovered. However, today, industrial competition could make recovery from such a mistake irretrievable. All products today are far more interrelated than they used to be. Technological and social changes are happening more rapidly. We can no longer rely on learning from our mistakes through evolution. There simply isn't enough time. A good example of this can be found in stereo equipment. For consumers like you and I, record players were followed by reel-to-reel tape decks. Then came cassettes and 8-tracks. So for the home buyer, reel-to-reel machines soon became obsolete. But 8-tracks didn't last very long either. They had a tendency to stretch the tapes and distort the sound, so pretty soon 8-track home machines became obsolete, as did all the equipment that went with them. And from cassettes, we now have compact discs. These are very popular in the music industry, and there are now other items like video discs and digital tapes, all requiring their own dedicated equipment, all very costly. There are hundreds, thousands of companies making recording equipment and millions of people buying it. For manufacturers, the stakes are high. Competition is fierce. Technology moves fast. Mistakes are costly. And there is no time for slow evolution. So the importance of planning in design was never more apparent. And designers have never been asked to be so effective before. So design in this form is relatively new. More than ever, design must be well considered and appropriate, not just for today, but for the future. So in this highly complicated, fast-changing world, how do we go about it? How can we tell appropriate from inappropriate design? In the past, we used our experience, our physical senses, touch, the feel of things, and we asked our elders, or we used our common sense. So judging the appropriateness of design demands the understanding of who it's for, what it's supposed to do, what it will be made from, how it will be made, who will make it, how long it will last, and its various effects on society and our environment. Good design takes each factor in turn and offers an optimum solution. Not merely utilitarian, not unnecessarily fanciful, but appropriate. To understand this, we must try to be a bit like a detective and learn to look for clues, not only about clothes, but other familiar products too. At first glance, these stoves all seem to look the same. Not only similar to themselves, but not that much different from dishwashers and washing machines and tumble dryers. They all look a bit like white robots. But we can tell these are stoves because of these burners. Visual clues, and that is our stepping off point. These stoves look similar because they are what are called mature products. Stoves have been around so long that we know how to make them, what they will look like, what they do, and where they will be used. And we must be offered the right kind of clues, appropriate clues. For instance, which burner does this control operate? Not quite clear, is it? We need simple visual aids to link the control with the burner. If you get it wrong, you either get cold food or perhaps you burn yourself. So we've already discovered two kinds of clues. Clues to identify the product and clues on how to use it. That seems fairly obvious, but is it? All these machines have buttons that push, levers that slide, and knobs that rotate, or you pull, even for people with failing eyesight. We need the appropriate clue. But remember, the wrong clue can be dangerous, or in this case, rather embarrassing. Mind you, reading clues isn't always simple. For example, here's another familiar sight. Plastic wood grain. Now this is a strange material. It should be giving us clues about the material it's made from, but instead mimics another material altogether. Most of us know that wood isn't plastic, so why do we find many plastic products that try to look as if they are made of wood? Well, let's first look at what we know about wood. Most of us have, throughout our lives, built up some understanding of wood. We've used our experience. We know that wood is natural, almost warm to the touch. Wood seems to go with anything. It's nice to look at. And that's probably due to its colour and its non-repetitive pattern. Like flames in a fire, it's easy on the eye. We even touch wood for luck. It seems as if manufacturers are hoping that some of these qualities will rub off if they put plastic wood grain on their products, like stoves or microwave ovens. But the material is giving false clues, because plastic wood grain doesn't have the same properties as wood. Confusing the clues confuses the user, clues that relate to the performance characteristics of materials. For example, some years ago, it was found that two plastics, ABS and polycarbonate, could be chrome-plated, imitating metal. You can find chrome-plated plastic products in the home and the motor car, for instance. Why? Well, to save weight. Since plastic is less dense than steel, bumpers and lamp surrounds are now made in plastic. False visual clues. But does that matter? After all, steel rusts and plastic doesn't. So maybe that's an advantage. But when bashed, steel dents and plastic will usually shatter. And strength on impact is a critical consideration in the function of a car. And imitation in this case produces very different performance characteristics. So just using visual clues can easily get us into trouble. We have to look beyond the visual and use those other senses we mentioned earlier. Here's another case of imitation. This jacket may look like leather, but in fact it's made of plastic. Many things once made of leather are now made of plastic. In fact, some people feel that if we had had plastic before we started using leather, the cows would still have their coats on. However, by using our senses other than sight and using a little common sense, we can learn important clues to the appropriateness of materials. Like wood, leather is a natural material, limited in thickness and size, depending on the cow or the animal. We can slice it, laminate it, emboss it, colour it, glue it, and usually we sew pieces of it together. Now, while plastic can imitate leather very convincingly, it doesn't necessarily offer the same result. For instance, have you ever wondered why there are so few men's plastic everyday shoes? You see, leather is a skin, so it acts like a skin. It breathes, and like our own skins, it doesn't crack when subjected to bending or creasing. It also tends to be elastic, and it doesn't become brittle in cold temperatures, though like our skins, it sometimes needs some lubrication. Plastic, on the other hand, is generally the opposite. It gets hard and rigid when it's cold. That's why it's hard to get ski boots on when you've left them outside. And when you crease plastic, like this polystyrene, a very common piece of plastic, it tends to concentrate rather than distribute the forces, and you can see this in this white line. We can show this on a diagram. Leather distributes, as does the skin, the bending forces within itself. Plastic concentrates them and can crack. Of course, some plastics are more flexible, but in general, most plastics will react this way. Plastic also won't breathe, and instead of being elastic and springing back to its original shape, it creeps. That is, it becomes permanently deformed. So, this is why plastic is not the best material for a jacket or a pair of shoes. Leather just makes more sense. Oh, plastic can look like leather, but it can't perform the same. That's one up for leather, but there's more. We may not get many plastic everyday shoes yet, but we do have plastic as well as leather ice skates. Now, how do these compare? Well, visually, they look similar, though there are some differences. Seams are joining the leather pieces together here, whereas the plastic boots generally are made in one piece. Now, these are clues about how they are made. The leather boot has a smooth form, following the lines of the foot. The plastic boot seems a bit more bulky and therefore different because it has to be thicker in some places than others to avoid the plastic cracking when it bends. The leather boot uses traditional manufacturing methods, whereas the plastic boot has been moulded in one piece. And in both cases, the designers have employed the appropriate manufacturing technique for the material. But what about the appropriateness of the material to stress and to comfort in the case of ice skates? Well, the fit in the plastic boot relies on the padding, which also tends to absorb all the sweat, or more politely, the perspiration from our feet. Plastic boots get rigid when it's cold, offering ankle skaters like myself more support. But a professional hockey player doesn't need the same kind of support. His ankles are stronger. He skates almost every day, and people like me only skate a few times a year. And he wears them for much longer periods, and leather helps his feet breathe. Indirectly, then, we've been dealing with another kind of clue, which relates to the fact that people are different, have different abilities, and what is right for one is not necessarily right for another. And thanks to plastic, I get an appropriate pair of skates. That makes it 1-all leather and plastic, but there's even more in our quest for clues. These riding boots look alike, don't they? But this one's vinyl, a type of plastic, and this one's leather. An interesting comparison. Vinyl is very supple, but it still gets like all plastics, more rigid in cold temperatures. Fortunately, we tend to ride in the warm, so rigidity isn't a problem. However, the leather boots fit better because they could be made not just to fit the foot, but the whole bottom half of the leg. However, they are generally more expensive. But the vinyl boots are waterproof. Leather isn't. So these vinyl ones are great when you find yourself in a bit of a sticky situation. Fortunately, water doesn't go in either, because the sole and the foot are moulded in one piece and are waterproof. Pity they use phony stitching though, because we might mistake them for leather boots. This could be unfortunate. Because although the cheaper vinyl boots are comfortable enough to wear for a couple of hours, they are not suitable for a whole day of riding. Vinyl doesn't breathe like leather, nor does it offer the same custom fit. Which are best? Well, both are. It depends on how and where they will be used. In other words, the appropriateness of either design. People ride differently in different parts of the world, depending on what they're doing, the climate, the distances, and even the sizes of the horse. You see, appropriate design is also about putting the right product in the right place at the right time. To do that, we must try to respect another factor, another clue: cultural differences. Some things perfect in one place are not in another. The Mexican sombrero is great under the overhead sun, but not right for a shopping mall. For instance, the Indian sari is ideal in hot, often humid areas of India, but out of place in the Arctic. It's interesting, by the way, to realise that the sari, the Roman toga, and the Scottish kilt are basically the same multi-purpose item of clothing, simply adapted to fit the fabrics and climate of their users. But the point is that it is all too easy to see something different in a film, in a magazine, or while we're on vacation and think, wouldn't that be great back home? Often, that's how good new ideas spread, but more often than not, they don't fit with our environment, our climate, and our own evolved social customs. That's why when we go abroad, things are different. They have to be. Vive la différence. But not just for the sake of being different. Time for another clue, time itself. What do we know about time? Well, we know that things change with time and that products have evolved with time. This old key is different to this modern one because locks today are different. This ballpoint pen is more convenient to use than this one. But it makes me think of that saying, they don't make them like they used to. Well, it's true. A Rolls Royce made exactly as it was in, say, 1910 would now cost millions of dollars. Today, a Rolls Royce costs $200,000 or $300,000. That's still a lot of money, but a lot less than trying to reproduce an old one, because today's Rolls Royce is a totally different car. What all this means is that each product probably was the best product that could be made at that time. When labour was cheap and mass production was limited, handmade was the best. There was craftsmanship then. But times have changed, and labour is not only expensive, we now have machines that can make things far more accurately than people can. In today's world, where we have a wide range but limited quantities of natural resources, it is essential to make things cost-effective. Unfortunately, some manufacturers think cost-effectiveness simply means cheaper. So we must look closer for clues to judge the functional qualities of a product. Now, another consideration with time is concerned with us. So what is appropriate for me now probably won't be appropriate in a few years. And since we change with time, it's hardly surprising that our values do too. Nor is it surprising to find that as products change, they age. For an example of what this can mean to their design, let's take what many people believe to be the first international product, jeans. As you may have noticed, these are brand new, and they're just a little stiff and a tad uncomfortable. But when they're broken in, they're great, at their best. And nowadays, stores even pre-wash them to break them in for us. How nice of them. And that's the way we all seem to think of jeans. But if things are going to get worn in, they're also going to get worn out. Although sometimes in this crazy world, it means that they're right in fashion. Probably by the time you see this, fashions will have changed. But I'll swap these for a new pair any day. No, not these. Bell-bottoms went out of fashion before they wore out. Thanks. That's better. But this effect of time is important and inevitable. Everything that is new now will one day be old. Jeans are just one example, but interesting not just because of fashion, but because they've become quite personal items, and we tend to be more sensitive about things when they're close to us. Other products show the effects of time more subtly, through wear marks, looseness in joints, even rust or corrosion. More clues to look for and to wonder how long something will last, or even to ask yourself, what would this look like in a year? Well, time marches on, and my feet are reminding me that shoes age too, and I've been in these quite a lot today. So let's just pop over there. I think I see something else that's appropriate for me right now. Oh, that's better. The right product in the right place at the right time. So where are we? Well, everything we've been looking at in one form or another has something to do with the appropriateness of design and how we can evaluate it. And to do this, we need to trust our judgments, our own common sense, to understand the evolution of design and why things have changed. We have to learn to look for and understand important clues, clues that directly influence design. Generally, this will help us in trying to assess the benefits of new developments and technologies. We have to understand how things work, how they're made and what they're made of. And by comparing products, we can learn to recognize the potential dangers of imitation. And of course, time itself, its effects on us, on the change and the evolution of design and on the products themselves. And in all cases, there is always the need to understand the varieties of users there are. So, design affects us all in different ways. There could be no common formula, but we will take these clues to the factors for the evaluation of design, and use them in the next 6 programs. You'll find they will crop up time and again. In the next program, we will be looking at one of the most influential factors on good and bad design. Us, you and me. We'll be looking at how tall and short we are and what makes us comfortable and how we do things and the space we need to do them in. Should be a lot of fun. For now, this store over there seems appropriate, and I'll see you next time.